Good morning. My name is Martin Ulbrich, and I'm working in the European Commission, particularly in the Department on Content, Electronic Networks and Communication. And more specifically, I'm working in the department which is dealing with artificial intelligence. And today I am going to present to you the white paper on artificial intelligence, which the European Commission presented in February 2020. Now, the white paper of February 2020 is a very important document, and it has been discussed very much in the media and among all stakeholders, because we're setting out there, among other things, our approach to legislation, or at least the regulatory framework on artificial intelligence. But it is not the beginning of our work on artificial intelligence. We started already in 2018, that is 2 years ago. We set up a high-level group of experts in order to discuss the issues that artificial intelligence is raising in terms of ethics. The high-level group was the first of our approaches in order to assemble as many stakeholders as possible. That is something within the high-level group, which was composed of experts in AI coming from academia, coming from business, coming from civil society, from national and regional governments, and from all kinds of other organizations. And this is also what we have been doing ever since. And this high-level group has been working for 2 years. They issued in 2019 a set of ethics guidelines for artificial intelligence, which were welcomed by the European Commission. But it was felt after the work of the high-level group that just ethics guidelines is not enough, that in order to ensure that artificial intelligence is going the right way, it is good to have some guidelines which have been adopted and which are recommended to people, but that probably it would be important to have, in addition to the guidelines, also a regulatory approach, so some actual laws and some legislation which will have to be implemented. And in order to do that, we issued this white paper. The white paper, as I said, was presented in the beginning of 2020, in February, and the white paper has very much a double approach. And that is something which we are insisting upon, because it's not always what is reflected in the media. So in the white paper, first of all, we recall the argument about AI. So we are in favor of AI. AI is good. We really like AI. It's something which is very good for consumers. Consumers get larger choices, new services, better services, higher quality of life. So it's something which we should welcome. It's very good for business, obviously, because it gives lots of business opportunities for companies which are willing to invest into the new technology. And it's good as well for the public interest, because there are many public interests which can be much better pursued with artificial intelligence. Protection of the environment, fight against climate change, increasing safety, all of these things are areas where AI can do a lot of help. But it does also create some risks. So, for example, there may be issues of privacy. So artificial intelligence is very good at identifying people, much better than previous technologies. It's very good at discriminating people in the good thing as well, in the good direction as well as in the bad direction. So AI can very well target you and give you exactly what you want, depending on the characteristics it has understood about you. But then again, that may have some negative consequences on the issues of non-discrimination. And of course, AI may also be dangerous for safety. You know, if you have, in that respect, AI is just like any other technology. If you have a machine with AI inside and the AI malfunctions, then that machine may actually become dangerous. Typical example is self-driving cars. Self-driving cars, according to all predictions, will be much safer than human-driven cars, but they will still be dangerous. And there's still a possibility that they might kill you. We currently have something like 30,000 people killed on the streets of Europe every year. So if you have artificial intelligence, maybe that will go down by 90% to 3,000, but that's still 3,000 people killed. So there is a danger, even if AI is better than previous technologies. And it's really this double approach, which I think is going to be like a red thread throughout my presentation, because we do recognize the chances and we do acknowledge the problems. And that is as well something which we did in the white paper. So the white paper, as I said, was building on the work of the high-level group. But again, it is following very much a double approach. On the one hand, we want to encourage artificial intelligence. We want really to take advantage of all these wonderful possibilities that this technology will be giving us. One example is a very important example is the medical sector. AI will be improving very much both the diagnosis. So thanks to AI, it will be much better able to identify specifically the disease you have. It will be much better, provide much better treatment, because it is able to go through very vast amounts of data on medication and the combination of medications. And then you have all the things like AI-enabled surgery, which really reduces risks and dangers of operation. So it's something very good, and therefore we really want to promote it. So the white paper wasn't actually published on its day alone. It's part of a package. And in that package, we had in particular the data strategy, document and strategy, which is trying to make data available in order for AI to be developed. And then we had the white paper, where once again you had this double approach of an ecosystem of excellence. There's a number of issues in there which we try to address in order to advance the development of AI and the ecosystem of trust. I'm going to today talk mostly about the regulation aspect, because that's what the topic of the panel is. But it's very important to keep in mind that we always have been following those two approaches simultaneously. Now, the white paper is an instrument that we have in the European Commission, where we issue a document and then we ask for comments. And in this case, we had 4 months of comments, and we had a huge return in respondents from all over the world. We had more than 1,200 organizations, people, citizens responding. And once again, it was a fairly well-balanced mixture. We had lots of citizens, we had lots of businesses, obviously, that's very understandable. We had plenty of civil society, non-governmental organizations, etc. We obviously had also plenty of academia. We had public authorities, and we had some other people. So it's really a very wide swath of public opinion and of people who are working in this area who have participated. It was obviously mostly centered on the European Union. However, we got quite a number of respondents from other countries as well, including obviously the obvious suspects such as the US and the UK. I mean, the UK at that time was just out of the EU for a couple of weeks, but now this of course counts as a third country, and others which have been very effective and very active in that area, like Canada and Japan and China, but also countries like Syria, Iraq, and so it clearly did raise a lot of attention across the world. I checked before today. As far as I know, we did not get any comments from Russia. But that is obviously not a particular problem. We are always open for comments, even outside the public consultation spheres. So the ecosystem of trust, which is what we call the regulatory framework, the idea of building a system where people trust AI, and one tool for that is legislation, but it's not the only tool. So we are building on the work of the high-level group on artificial intelligence. That's what I mentioned at the beginning. We have the guidelines, which were issued in 2019. And the guidelines, which are fairly high level. I mean, they give you general principles, they give you a lot of ethical thinking, but it's not immediately translatable into practice. So in the second half of 2019, these guidelines were tested, and we produced, or the high-level group produced, an assessment list. Which is kind of a step-by-step approach for business, saying, okay, in order to have an ethical approach, what do you do? Do you have I done this? Should I be doing this? It's a kind of a very simple tool. So, and that gives us a number of ideas for what might be necessary or what might be useful in order to ensure that your approach to artificial intelligence is ethical. And of course, for us at the European Commission, it's very important, because we need to prevent fragmentation of the single market. We've got a single market of 27 member states. And that is a huge opportunity, because AI needs lots of data, they need scale. But if there are problems in terms of discrimination, in terms of privacy, in terms of not being able to find a human to talk to, people will not like that, and they will turn to the member states, and then the member states will start legislating on that, and then you break down the single market. So that's one of the reasons why we have taken this initiative at the European level. Interestingly enough, most member states, actually pretty much all member states, agree that this is something which we should be tackling at European level and not at national level, which is something which doesn't happen very often in the European Union. Now, let me quickly recall the basis on which we are, the objectives which we are, more the basis that on which we are building our work, which are the key requirements of the high-level group. There should be human agency and oversight, so it's important that there's always some human who's able to to correct mistakes that the system has made. And that is something which people are very concerned about, that they are lost in a system where a machine makes a mistake and then there's no way to correct that. It has to be robust and safe. Clearly, it has to be safe and also robust, so it should not give you wrong indications, even if it's not directly threatening to safety. So, for example, if you have a let's say an artificial intelligence software which helps you recruiting people and gives you completely wrong people, that's not dangerous for safety, but it's still clearly not very helpful. It should respect privacy and data governance. You know, that's very important in Europe. We have the General Data Protection Directive. It should be transparent. Very often that is a big problem because people may complain and they may think they have been discriminated or may think that something is wrong. And there's no way of actually checking that because the system is not transparent. It's because machine learning often does not allow you to trace back the actual reasoning. You've got this issue of this non-discrimination, and then you've got societal and environmental well-being, meaning basically that the system should be used for good purposes and not for negative purposes. And you've got the accountability, which is the idea that if something goes wrong, there also should be somebody who's liable for that. So you should be able not only to find somebody to overturn the problem, that's the first part, but also to say, okay, there's a problem. This problem has to be fixed. And once it has been fixed, the damages, somebody else has to. There's somebody who has to pay for it. Somebody is accountable for the system and responsible for that system. Now, these principles are fairly high level and fairly general, which is quite good because since we are working on this basis, and most of the other international organizations are working on this basis as well, and you will have heard today the Council of Europe. So So as you see, the key requirements on which we have been building our work are fairly general, and that is something quite helpful because, as you know, we're not the only ones who are active in this area. There is also the Council of Europe, there's UNESCO, there's the OECD, and on this level, it is fairly easy to agree. I would suggest that most of the approaches that are being taken by international organizations are fairly similar and these key requirements are probably something that most of the others would sign up to, and the principles that the others have identified are mostly things that we can sign up to. So there's a fairly wide general consensus on international level, and that is going to be helpful because it will be very important to find an approach at international level, because otherwise we will find ourselves in the situation where we have different regulations or different approaches between the UNESCO and the OECD and between different countries in the world, and that's only going to slow down the development of artificial intelligence. Public consultation ran for 4 months. We had more than 1,200 respondents. There's only very few people actually, and that's surprising because we had a large number of businesses, very few people who think that the current regulations are perfectly fine. There's a large part of people who think that we need new regulations, and then there's a large part of share of people who just say that the current legislation may have some gaps. But even among businesses, there are very few people who think that the way we have it right now, that's actually fine, we don't have any problems. So there's a quite general approach, a general feeling shared by everybody that some legislation is needed. And that is something which we are working on right now. In the white paper, we said we had a particular focus on biometric remote identification. That is basically currently face recognition. So if you have especially on public spaces, so basically if you survey a crowd somewhere on a public space and you identify people, it's called biometric remote identification and not face recognition, because nowadays it's face recognition, but you can also do that with gait recognition, so the way you walk, voice recognition, and other things. And there's a huge difference between a situation like the one I just described, where you survey a square and therefore just identify people, or where you just have identification as in your smartphone, where you just use biometric identification to log in or out, which is much less of a problem, of course. And that is also something which is very sensitive. We have had law cases, court cases in the European Union. People are very concerned about the idea of being tracked all the time. So we asked specifically about that question, what about biometric remote identification? And overwhelmingly, people were extremely cautious about that. We had various possibilities. Some people quite a lot of them actually said it should be completely banned. Others said, well, it should be suspended for the moment until we get a regularly appropriate framework. Others said we can have it, actually should be able to do that under certain conditions. And then some people, very few people said, just go ahead and there's no problem whatsoever. So that's basically the white paper that we discussed. The other idea, idea of the white paper, which I did not put on the slide, is the one that it's important to distinguish between what we call high-risk AI cases and other AI cases. So there's some AI applications which are very sensitive because they treat data of persons, because they allow you to track persons, because they have a huge impact on you, like when you're getting a job, or when your bank does not give you a credit, or when you get killed by a self-driving cars. But there are plenty of other AI applications which are completely harmless. You know, if you have a factory where you have to sort out some process, or if you have an AI algorithm which tells you that when the car is going to break down before it actually does so, that clearly has many less problems, and therefore if there's any regulation, it was suggested in the white paper, it should be focused only on high-risk cases, so only on those few cases where there actually is a problem, and not on AI as a general. We don't want to consider AI in general as a problem. On that respect, we had a fairly small response. Many people didn't answer the question. Maybe they didn't understand it. And those who did, there was a slight majority in favor of focusing on a high risk only. But here I come back to the approach that we had at the beginning. Overall, we really do like AI. It's something which is very good. And it does have some risks, but only certain applications do have some risk. So the overall approach of the white paper and of our policy in general to AI has always been and will continue to be a very strong yes, but. Thank you so much.